Michele Oberholtzer. Michele, come on up.
I met Ben at a work conference in San Antonio, Texas. I kind of used the business trip as an excuse to meet men, and I was scoped out my options when I went out on the networking floor. I was married at the time, though, so kind of made things a little interesting. But also, I was in an open relationship, so it was all right, even expected that I might do this. I took my ring off and left it in the hotel room and tried to meet a nice guy. And I got to talking to this guy named Ben, and we made plans that night to go to watch the presidential debate together. And so later on, Ben and I met up, and I actually kind of couldn't believe that it was the same person I met earlier. He looked completely different outside of his suit. He could have been like an acrobat or a jockey or something. He's this tiny little compact body. He weighed less than I did, which is not super ideal as a woman. And, you know, he had balding and scruffy beard, thin lips. It's just basically not the kind of guy you have like a romantic affair with. But it was a presidential debate, so whatever. We just went and hung out. And throughout the night, though, I began to see him with totally different eyes, like more so than anyone I've ever met. Ben was just totally unrestrained by self-consciousness. He was just open himself, completely alive, and it was really fun to be around him. And it developed into kind of something more. We had a romantic fling during that week. But then I went back to New York City, where I was living at the time, and he went off to San Francisco, and that was kind of it. Except for the next presidential debate happened, and Ben called me. And so I realized, okay, this has continued past the point of San Antonio. I need to level with him. And I told him, Ben, I'm married. And I explained the situation. It wasn't really cheating because it was allowed, but I should have told him, and I felt bad, and, you know, that's what's going on. Ben was understandably surprised, right, but also open-minded, and he said he had no expectations. I think he was just kind of happy that we were still talking. And he accepted it. So not so long after that, my husband had a business trip of his own. He left town, and Ben came to New York to see me. And we had this, again, wonderful time together over a few days. And there's one day in particular I'll never forget where we went over the whole city together. We just explored, and we were enjoying each other's company. We were, like, alive. And so much so that children on multiple occasions kept, like, smiling at us and, like, reaching out to us, like they could sense our wholeness, and they approved of us. And that night, we kind of lay together on my couch, and Ben pulled out his journal and read out something to me from a radio show that I'd recommended. It was a line that said something like, "When we made love, we knew how to forget ourselves. And to feel so much that the act is forgotten and all that remains is skin and hair and warmth is a gift." And we shared this heavy silence because we both knew, like, that quote was about us. And then Ben read it again, and I lost it. Like, not only had he listened to the same show that I recommended, but he had written down his favorite line. And not only had he written it down, but he read it out loud to me. And for God's sake, not only did he read it out loud, he read it twice, just so I would really know how much it meant to him. I cried. And I wrote in my journal later on, I've discovered this thing that I didn't even know that I was looking for, and it feels wonderful because it exists. And I was so joyful in this discovery, but of course at the same time there were all these horrible implications because I was married, and I actually thought that I was happily married, so what did this all mean? And maybe predictably in retrospect, the marriage fell apart from there. I don't really blame Ben for it. I think that the open relationship kind of was a Band-Aid that covered up a lot of other things. But there's no doubt to me that Ben was a catalyst. He was a central player in all of that. And after I moved out of my husband and my place, Ben and I talked every night. We were in love, and we knew it. But we didn't say it because it was too soon. And it was especially sad because Ben, in his 30 years, had never exchanged I love yous with another woman. Never had that experience. And anyway, in this period of all this change, I was then in a car accident. The seatbelt broke my sternum and my ribs, and Ben came to the rescue. He showered me with kisses. He called me his fallen angel. And it was wonderful and sweet and kind, and I just couldn't handle it. The car accident kind of revealed to me how far from okay I really was. And I cried. And when I cried, the pain of the lost marriage and the uncertain future was compounded by my broken ribs, and it created this vicious cycle of more pain that made it impossible to cry and impossible not to. And Ben told me he loved me, and I didn't answer. I told him that I needed a lot more time than I thought I did. And now, I don't really know how to think about Ben. You know, in some respects, I think I have this aversion to him. He is so connected to this really painful and hurtful time in my life that I just want to kind of escape that and move on. But I also feel like he's the only man who really ever understood me, and maybe he's the only one who can ever get me to that point of happiness that I've so long sought after. And so, without knowing what will happen in the future and without any expectation, I do want to say something to Ben, wherever he is. And I'll say it twice just so he knows that I mean it. I loved you, Ben. I loved you.
There you go. How's that for number one? Michele, give her a big round of applause.